century. Happy to have you here this morning. We are anxious and excited to hear more about missing and murdered Indigenous women. We have with us today Miss Rachel LaRose and Miss Amara Arthur. They're both from the Minneapolis American Indian Center. So we'll get started right away.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, everybody. Quick question. Has anybody heard about the missing and murdered Indigenous women's, movement, awareness, efforts? Yeah, a few of you? Well, that's good to know. Well, that's what we're here to talk about today. I brought Amara with me. Amara just graduated high school from Prior Lake, and she actually did her senior project on missing and murdered. She's my daughter, and she was really excited to come with me and be a part of this. So it was very welcoming. You want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Amara Arthur. As she said, I just graduated high school, and I think it's really important to teach my peers of the same age the problems that I've had to endure my whole life. So I just think it's really cool to be here today.
Thank you. So, what I like to call missing and murdered Indigenous women's efforts, it's an epidemic when Indigenous women go missing or, they're murdered. There often is no coverage of it. There's no immediate response to it for whatever reason. And a lot of that stems from take it way back to, when colonization started. Native American women back then, when they first landed on the eastern seaboard, the Indigenous people that were here, welcomed the people that came and, landed here. And they seen these women who were, partially dressed, these Indigenous women, and it sort of set the tone that, they were objectified from that point, seeing as something of something they fantasized about because these women wore no clothes. They were different. And that still happens today. That's why, I work a lot with sexual assault victims who are Indigenous women. I work in a program that's culturally specific to Indigenous women in Minneapolis, out of the American Indian Center. My program is called Indigenous Women's LifeNet, and I serve Indigenous women all throughout Minneapolis, St. Paul, even as across the country, women who might have been from here, left state, want to come home, don't know what to do. That's where I step in. I get them back here and do what I can to, try to get them, whether they're, assaulted sexually by a stranger, by a family member, or they are trafficking themselves or being trafficked. That's still sexual assault. It stems from poverty. It stems from historical trauma. Have you guys ever heard that term? That's a whole nother topic. But anyhow, there's so many things that go into factors that contribute or are the result of this. Drug addiction. A lot of women will be trafficked or traffic themselves to get that, and they go missing or they're murdered, and they're often overlooked because of their situation, of their background, of what they've come from, and it's really sad. Minnesota is the first state in the country to actually have an office dedicated to missing and murdered Indigenous women. And that was just signed into legislation this summer. along with missing and murdered African American women, which is huge. And people say, well, why? Why do we need these offices dedicated to Native American women and African American women? These offices wouldn't be needed if the response to their going missing and them being murdered were as, if it were as important as, say, a Caucasian woman. And I hate to say that, but if that were the case, if the response efforts were the same as when a Caucasian woman goes missing, we wouldn't need these dedicated offices signed into legislation. We wouldn't need to bring awareness because it would already be there. So that's why we're here, and that's why I'm here, and this is why it's important. From 2010 to 2018, here in Minnesota alone, 7% of these cases of missing and murdered women were Native American women in Minnesota. We account for maybe 1% of the population. So those numbers are very overrepresented. How is it that we only have 1% population, but these cases make up 7%? So this is why it's important that we make everybody aware and how important it is to not only have the Native allies and the Native, community doing this, but we have non-Native allies too. That's the most important thing. So if you just look at some of these are some of the statistics across the country. And a lot of this, and it says right there, Native Americans represent only 0.8% of the population. But as a whole, in the United States, 0.8% of them are missing. And that's just a snippet. We are very underrepresented in numbers as far as FBI, as far as state, local, tribal, because they're not all on the same page. It gets kind of wonky and, it can get mixed up when it comes to jurisdictions, like I said, state, tribal, federal. We don't have tribal police in Minneapolis or in the urban areas. Those are reservation, police. We rely on state police just as much as the next person. Don't matter what race, gender, or anything. So the point of having these efforts is so that we are just heard. These women have a voice. We have a few women in the state alone that have been missing, have been murdered, and have gotten next to no coverage. Right down in Albert Lee, JoJo Boswell went missing after being released from incarceration, and nobody's heard from her since. They seen her at a store, went missing, no trace. We had Amber Hopkins, North Minneapolis, was found beaten and dead in an alley. No reason, I don't even know if there's even been any arrests, but it was something we heard about for a second, and that was it. So every February, this is May 5th, was Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Day. This past May, my daughter attended with me. This is a cause that's near and dear to her heart. And we did a red dress installation on the Capitol lawn in St. Paul. It required weeks of volunteers cutting out cardboards, making them into red dresses, painting them red, and then invited community members, advocates, allies to come and decorate those dresses, and yet we got to, along with many others, got to install them on the Capitol for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Day. Every February on Valentine's Day, the 14th, we hold an annual march at the Minneapolis American Indian Center. And it's grown from a few hundred to at least 1,000 now, where we walk for about, it's not a long walk, but it's about a half-hour walk just to bring awareness. And this happens across the country. Canada was big in starting the MMIW awareness and movement efforts. because they are, you know, they have the same problem we do in America. There is no database that tracks that. So these are just some of the names of MMIW. I mean, there's so many, but these are just some of the names, and this is why advocates do this work, because they don't have a voice anymore. They aren't here to tell their story. So we have Yvonne Elizabeth King, Mary Susan Evans, Harlech, Anne Maria Lucas, Sarah Obed, Kimberly Jerus, Stephanie Comier Chasen, Bernice Joan Rich, Loretta Sanders. There's a lot of names not recorded that have went missing for whatever reasons. Either they're unidentified or they just chose not to have their names, family chose not to have their names on there. We have Daphne Mesher Brown, Sharon Murphy, Henrietta Millett, Elaine Flowers, Joanna Anderson, Deidre Marie Michelin, Roberta Birdie Jean Rains, Marguerite Dyson, Eleanor Trujillo, Judy Amanois Ogden, Daisy Mae Heath, Serena Colson, Rosalita Rose Longby, Jojo Boswell, and in 2017 we had Savannah LaFontaine Graywin, who was brutally murdered at the age of 22 by her partner. MMIW ties in with DV and sexual assault and substance abuse and poverty. It's all a circle. It's all, and it's based on that historical trauma. And this is why I do the work that I do. She was murdered by her partner, and if she, you know, who knows if she had help? Who knows if she had a domestic violence advocate or a case against him, or, you know. So this is why it's important. Yeah.
And I just want to add, it may not seem like a lot of names, but I was going through thousands of names last night, trying to figure out, we're trying to find a way to fit every single name, but there's just no possible way to do that. So just because of the little bit of names you see, there's tons and tons and tons of missing and murdered Indigenous women out there who I just couldn't put down.
And I had my daughter help me with these PowerPoints. I'm a little older, and when we were in high school, we didn't need to do these. And I still don't really need to do them, so, you know, you guys have to, she had to, so. Anyhow, again, I said all these names, and that's just, again, a snippet of what is recorded, because, again, they don't have a voice to be here, and I just feel like it's important that I were to say each and every name that is on this list. So these are just some quick facts and figures. You guys can read for yourselves the number of known incidents. This is what is alarming right here. These are known incidents, but only 116 of them were logged in the Department of Justice database. Why is that? Does anybody have any idea? No? Again, it goes back into that there's just different jurisdictions. Some people pass it off. It's just simply not important to a lot of people. And that's why it's an epidemic. These are why these offices are being created. These are why these days of awareness are being put into, you know, like the May 5th day, Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Day. A lot of women don't go to the police. A lot of families don't go to the police because they will get written off. They will be told it's not important. If an adult is missing, they are an adult. A lot of, and I can speak from this for myself because of the work I do and the women I interview and do intakes with. Do you want to report this? Has this been reported to the police? No. Why not? And a lot of them will tell you because they don't trust the police. They have children that they are in fear of getting taken away if they make a report to these police. There's a big, big problem here. And this is why we need awareness. This is why we need non-Native allies too. 96% on some reservations, the number of sexual violence against Native women committed by non-Natives. There's a report out that was done by the Minnesota Indian Women Sexual Assault Coalition, and it's called The Garden of Truth. There's a story of this woman in there who was trafficked so that she could have a place to stay. It's called survival sex. It's called survival trafficking, where a woman will participate in that because she needs some place to stay. She might need just to get her basic needs met. She might just need somewhere to, cook a meal. But that's what she'll have to do in order to do that. There's a story in there about where a man straight up told her, being with you is probably why it felt like he was conquering America by sleeping with her, because she was Native. These stories don't get brought to light. A lot of you are too young to even know about it, but it is a public publication. And as you get older, I suggest, you look into things of that nature. But it's a very informative report on why things have happened. There's actually a girl in there who was murdered not long after that report came out. And she was found in an alley in South Minneapolis. No arrests were made, but her story was in that Garden of Truth report. So if we're only about 1% of the population in America, why is it that Native women are assaulted so often and 2.5 times are likely? Again, I say our population's we're underrepresented, but we're overrepresented when it comes to these things. So we had this elaborate presentation ready, thanks to my daughter, but we have a 2-year-old little pit chow with big paws who decided to crush the MacBook the other day. And we didn't know if it was on the cloud. She couldn't find it, so they had to put everything on an external hard drive. So we're kind of, it was like either cancel today or throw something together and talk about something that we're really passionate about, and we chose to be here and talk about something we're really passionate about. Anything you want to talk about? No, she's really nervous. But again, we do this every February, and I encourage you all to, get out there and see what you can do to bring awareness. Do your part, even if it's something small. The logo is the red handprint over the face, and that signifies they don't have that voice. They're gone. So that's what we are here for, to be their voice. Is there any questions? No? So maybe something could be started up here in Rochester. I don't know that there is. Every 14th, maybe your school participates in making a red handprint picture or something, It would be really great. And I'd love to come back here with a more elaborate presentation next time. But yeah, Lisa.
There was a Caucasian woman who was murdered and went missing this last fall, summer
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of publicity went into her case.
It
Does
did.
something like that make you crazy when Native American women don't get the publicity to find them?
It doesn't make me go crazy. I just wish that was the case for all. I'm glad Miss Petito got that coverage. That's the kind of coverage every missing person, whether you're a woman, a female, a woman or a male, Indigenous, Caucasian, any other person of color. That's the kind of coverage every person deserves, especially when it was a result of, possible result of domestic violence. So it didn't make me crazy. It just makes me more willing to want to bring this awareness to everybody else, which is why I was so thrilled that they also passed the missing and murdered African American woman's office too. And they are the first of the kind in this country. So hopefully it's just a starting point that they'll be able. And I don't know if you guys have noticed, we were driving, this is up in the city, so I don't know if it's like that down here. I've never been down here to Rochester, and it's only about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive, but we were driving in the cities and we seen this humongous billboard of this Indigenous woman with a hand over her mouth, a red hand, and it gave a snippet of her story. Does anybody know if those are down here, those billboards of MMIW? Yeah, they're recent. I know the first one was in Montana, about 2016, 2017, something like that. But with those efforts, it's, they're so incredible, and it's so welcoming to see that, we're using technology to get these voices out, with electronic billboards. Is there anything else?
I know a lot of us might be a little bit naive on how reservations work in the United States, and maybe some people are a little bit confused how somebody of Caucasian descent would be able to come onto the reservation and cause any sort of violence. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, reservations are not closed, at least that I know of here in Minnesota. And, there's nothing saying, only Native people allowed. So, I don't know that necessarily, people are just weird. I guess somebody could just say, oh, I want to go cause problems, but there's a lot of camaraderie, despite what many believe or hear. There is camaraderie amongst natives on the reservation. There's non-natives that live on the reservation, and they have businesses and, partnerships, and there's this reservation my grandmother's from, and it's the Leech Lake Reservation, and there's this one store in town, this one big grocery store gas station, and it was owned by a white family, and they just sold it to the tribe, but that was through years of business. It wasn't, I don't know if that answers something of what you're saying. It just, there's nothing stopping anybody from coming on the reservation. It just, again, there is, some understandings, like, I'm from the Fond du Lac Reservation, and that's in Cloquet, Minnesota, which is about 2 hours north of the metro area, and that particular tribal police office station officers will work with the Cloquet City Police Department, whether they need assistance or vice versa. 'Cause there's a lot of things that happen on the reservations, like non-natives coming to reservations and selling drugs. There's nothing really stopping that, so. I want to talk about a story. that hit close to home for me. When I was about, in my 20s, my grandma told me she worked for this prominent family in the cities. They were big, and still are to this day. And she would do housework, and she would, nanny for them. And one day, the husband's sister came over and noticed how well Margaret kept this house clean and how well the children were with her. And she said, well, do you mind if, coming over to my house and helping out when you're not helping out here? And, we'll pay you. And my grandma said, sure. And this lady, the wife was always home, but one day she wasn't. Well, my grandmother was there cleaning. And the husband was there. And she could have potentially been a victim of missing and murder because he put something in her drink, she was losing consciousness in and out, and he was asking her blatantly, do you feel normal yet? Or, do you feel funny yet? Are you feeling normal? She literally had to run out of that house and never look back. My daughter and her friends were lured. She could have easily been a case. They attempted to lure her and her friends. And it was a white male. And it was her and a Hispanic girl and an African American girl and another Native American girl that he was attempting to lure right in broad daylight. And we did go to the police.
Oh, yeah.
We did go to the police, and initially the mall security were brushing it off. No, there's nothing we can do. No, there's no surveillance. I said, okay, well, we'll go to the police. We went to the police, and I said, I really, really, really need you guys to, make an effort to find out who tried to do this, who did this. Hold them accountable, please. These are children. No matter which way you look at it, they're children. And they were great. They helped us, and they got the guy, and he was charged. They were able to find surveillance. So despite what the mall security were telling us, they were able to get surveillance, thank goodness, and he was charged. And I just wish it was like that across the board, because clearly you see the numbers and it's not, and it needs to change. But yeah. How long have I been doing this and why? I've been doing this about 6 years now. I was a stay-at-home mom, and I never thought I would get into this work. I always thought I wanted to be a social worker for children at schools. And I did an internship my internship fell through at Children's. And I had to find one on the fly, and I was, the Native community is a small community. A lot of people know each other, or it's like 6 degrees of separation almost. And so my mom was like, here, try this one. Try this girl, I think she needs help. And I said, okay, And I go, well, what do you do? And she goes, well, I'm an advocate for Native women. And I go, okay, but what do you do? Like, for what? And she goes, for domestic violence, sexual assault, and missing and murdered. So she's still my mentor today, and I grew a passion for this, and I didn't know I would. So, and I also have, tons of peers who are just like these women. I have 2 daughters who look just like these women. Cousins, nieces, a sister, a mom. So that's why I do what I do. It's important to me. It's something that hits close to home. But thank you for asking. Anybody else? Yeah?
What does advocacy and support for the families look like on the reservation?
As far as MMIW,
Yes.
I'm not sure. I really don't know. I don't work on the reservation. I've never lived on a reservation. And I seldomly go. She knows. Surprisingly, she's got some info.
I'm sorry, can you ask your question one more time?
Yes, I was just wondering what advocacy and support for the families.
Okay, so on, we'll say my reservation, there is the community, like my mom said, is very close, intertwined. And within the community center, they have advocacy help, or like people, advocates, who can help out women who have been through anything like, like abuse, anything like that. They have
Sexual assault? What is it? What are you trying to say? Okay. Uh-huh.
anyways, people within the community, they always have people to help out. If someone goes missing, they will have people make posters, share it on Facebook, make sure they have a fire going. So like in Ojibwe culture, we'll have a fire to help the women who have been murdered or anyone who has really passed away go into the spirit world. So they'll have, members bring food, bring, anything that the family really needs, and it's always been like that. Everyone is like really close, no matter what, especially during times like that.
So yeah, I can't speak as to what is done on the reservations, and that's, that brings up a good point for me to maybe go and explore. But what we do in the cities is, again, we get the word out. If, a family comes to somebody, even hey, I haven't heard from such and such, can you share this post, or who can we call? Can we check the shelters? Can we, can we check with her friend? Oh, I see you have a mutual friend. Can you reach out? It's a lot of word of mouth. And as far as support, again, what we do at my work is we will do a lot of cultural healing, a lot of, like I have a women's group that meets every Tuesday, 1 to 3. We are exploring Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu so that we have a self-defense mechanism in case something were to happen. So it's things of that nature. We'll reach out to other organizations, get some spiritual guidance, some spiritual healing. We'll have somebody sing spiritual songs. So it's just, we rely a lot on culture. We rely on incorporating that into modern day. We rely on technology. So yeah. Anybody else? Yes? I'm sorry, hon, I can't.
Oh, she's asking, like, generally the race of the men that are, or the people that are doing the murdering, kidnapping, is it generally Caucasian or is it more Native?
It varies, but again, we don't know. A lot of these cases aren't even logged. A lot of these cases aren't followed through on. But I know with Savannah, that was one of the recent cases. With Savannah, it was her boyfriend and he was Native. So again, we have a lot of holes in the data that would give us a better idea as to who and why, they did what they did to these women that have been murdered. Anybody else? Yeah?
Can you talk more about historical trauma?
I've been to a lot of trainings, I would like to think, and I've, taken classes that have taught that subject. Do you feel like you can talk about historical trauma? I don't know. It's basically, what I get from historical trauma is everything an oppressed group of people has been through for generations. There's evidence that historical trauma, the traumas that our grandparents, parents, ancestors have endured, is passed through on DNA. Is there something you want to say? Yeah. So, it basically, historical trauma is like what my people have been through, what my ancestors have been through, and how that trickles down today. With historical trauma, we focus on everything that has happened negatively, more so than the good. They say, oh, well, I hear a lot of stuff about my people, and when I say my people, I mean Indigenous people. A lot of negative. You're lazy. All you guys do is drink. You guys are homeless, and a lot of these issues are true. A lot of those things are true, but not for all of us. And a lot of those are the direct result of the traumas they've been through, or indirectly what their family has been through. Take, for instance, the boarding schools. Have you guys heard about the boarding schools and the Indigenous children and what things that may have been done to them? I think they just uncovered over 7,000 bodies in Canada of children that were at these boarding schools. They were forced, to go through the church, and the things that were happened to them, I'm not going to say all of them, but a lot of them went through atrocious things. And that trauma, there was a disconnection. We lost culture because of it. And that started the disconnection where parents didn't know how to be parents. They were having these kids but didn't know how to parent because of that disconnection. They weren't raised in a family. They were taken and forced to be raised by these religious people, teachers. That disconnection started a lot of things. It started the self-medicating. It started that abuse that was learned onto maybe other children in their family or children they may have had. Drug abuse, addiction, poverty, homelessness, not wanting to go to school. I always thought, why don't I like school? What is it? Why don't I feel connected? Why is it that I don't understand it and don't want to understand it? Well, maybe it's because your grandparents went through that. And because that's passed down through your DNA, those traumas, you're feeling that in some way. But with historical trauma, we could dwell on that. It's an important thing to learn, but the other end of that is the resilience. The resilience of those traumas and understanding them. I didn't know about historical trauma until I went to college. I was a young mother. I didn't go to college until my mid-20s. And then I started learning about these things. Historical trauma, boarding schools, loss of culture, all kinds of things I didn't know about what Indigenous people have endured, because our grandparents don't talk about that. Our grandparents don't talk about what happened to them. Another reason there's a loss of culture is because of the Urban Indian Relocation Act that happened, where back in the day, way back in the day, when they forced Indigenous people onto these reservations so that they could have the nice lands, and fast forward to the 50s, where the Urban Indian Relocation Act happened, where they didn't want them on the reservations anymore. They wanted them to be in the urban society. Get away from this life that we put you on. Get away from this land we put you on and come back to the city. There was another disconnection there because, well, we're on these reservations and it's community and everybody knows each other and you're practicing your spiritual, what wasn't, it was outlawed until what, the 80s? To practice our culture, our spiritual ways. Come back here, get a job in the city, have a home in the city, go to work, go to church, that was another disconnection. I have no idea about the lands my grandparents came from because I was raised in the city. She was raised in the suburbs. She has no idea what city life is like, what it's like to grow up in poverty, what it's like to have an aunt right down the block. She don't know that life. So there's another disconnection on a personal level for me, but it's what you do with these disconnections and how you get back to that way of living as a native in a modern day, but building a connection again, healing from traumas that you don't know about, but you feel them. Healing from traumas you've been through, so you don't pass those down to your kids and their kids and their kids, and it's all about that resilience. So, anything else you want to talk about on that? I talked about it a lot to my kids. I didn't think I was going to be put on the spot about historical trauma, but these are things, again, that aren't taught in high school, grade school, junior high. These are taught in college, and I'd like to see it taught in public education and, in high school, at least. They've been hearing about this since they were about 10 years old when I finally got to go back to school. And I just think it's important. It's so important that we all know what we've been through individually. This isn't just something that natives went through. Whatever your grandma and grandpa went through, it's in your blood, good or bad. You don't have to be native to heal that, to, understand that, and to have that. Anything else? Yeah?
Do you think the Native women are going missing because of racial prejudice or because they're being fetishized?
Oh, definitely both. Absolutely both. It goes back to that, and I learned this in one of my Indian history classes, was that we were, what is that word I'm looking for? We were looked at as sexual object. I think I touched on that a little earlier, but we were looked at as something that could be conquered back in the 1700s. And even now she reads on this, even now too, which is, understandable, believable, and it does happen. Go ahead.
So, when I was doing my research again, if you search up Native American woman, it will be lists and lists of fetishizing, oh my God, anyways, of Native American women, and it'll be like, they want to feel powerful. They will feel powerful due to that fact that we are less than 1% of the population. So they feel like they are too powerful for anything, so they want to take advantage of Native American women.
Anything else? Any other questions? Yes, Ms. Baker.
Could you talk about your senior project?
Okay, so yeah, since this is a cause that's really close to my heart, dealing with that I am Native American, I decided that this would be like a really good topic to discuss about due to being in a mostly predominantly white area. And no one really knows Native Americans are like the butt of the joke where I'm from. We don't get that respect, nothing. They assume that we are rich, we have all this money, we don't pay taxes, anything like that. So I wanted to show that, Indigenous women, Indigenous people face these things. So with my project, I made sure to touch base on all the statistics and everything like I did today. And I just wanted to show, we're still here. Even though that's crazy to think that 90% of our population was wiped out, we're still here. But we are still going through the same exact things that we did 500 years ago. And I think that is sickening. We shouldn't have to go through these things. We are in the 21st century. And the fact that these women aren't getting the publicity, the media, the attention that white women do, it's sickening. So I had to bring awareness to that. Yeah.
That's all. Anything else? No? Okay, well, we would like to wrap it up. And I'd like to thank you all for sitting in, and Ms. Baker and Ms. Paulson for having us today. We will remain if there's any individual questions you guys might have. Again, I encourage you guys to, take a little piece by piece awareness. Thank you guys.